So, hello and welcome. Welcome to everybody to this talk, which is about training as a woman. In terms of what we're going to cover today, I'll say why I'm doing a talk specifically on training as a woman, why I think that talk is an important talk to have. I'll talk you through my 3 key principles for training as a woman. We'll look at some other factors affecting women as well. I'll give you a very quick way you can find out more about me. Just to say it from the beginning, this is not a sales talk. I'm not taking on new clients at the moment. So this is just sort of wanting to broaden all of our awareness about how we can improve our training as women. And then we'll have a Q&A at the end. Now, just to say, this is a jam-packed talk. There was so much I wanted to get in. This is normally the product of lots of other talks that I give, and I've kind of put it all in here together. So it is going to be long. There is a handout that goes with it. I'll send you the recording afterwards. You don't need to take notes. You'll get all the slides. You'll get a summary sheet of the main recommendations as well when I send out the recording. And the Q&A may run over the hour. If it does, I'll just keep recording. So when you get the recording, you'll get the answers through there. So if you've sent me questions in advance that I haven't answered in the session, I'll answer them at the end. Similarly, if you want to stick any questions into the chat, I will answer them at the end. So even if you need to leave before the hour's up, just pop it into the chat and then I'll answer it at the end and you'll get the recording afterwards. In terms of housekeeping, as I say, you'll get the slides, you'll get a worksheet, and you'll get the recording through afterwards. I won't then, if you haven't signed up to my mailing list, you won't get anything else from me after that. I think you're all on mute, but if you can make sure you stay on mute just to keep the sound quality good. If you're happy to keep your camera on, that's lovely, because it just is nice to know that I'm talking to real people. But if you want to turn it off, not a problem at all. You won't appear in the recording unless you unmute. If you unmute, then you'll be in, but otherwise you won't be in the recording. If you are popping questions, cool. Somebody said they can't hear, but I think it's just their settings. If you are popping questions in the chat, could you just put a Q at the front? And then that means when I'm scanning through the chat, I can quickly find your questions. Feel free to chat and react in there. It's brilliant to have a good chat going on in there. But if you just put a Q next to your question, then it means I can spot your question. And I don't think it needs saying, but can we just keep respect for each other in terms of anything that is shared, and particularly anything, can we keep it confidential, anything that's shared in here? So quickly to introduce myself for those of you who I don't know, my name's Lucy. I'm a triathlon coach. That's a photo from my very first triathlon, which I did back in 2012. I was not a sporty person at school at all. You would not expect that I would be sitting here being a triathlon coach now. But that first triathlon literally changed my life to the point that I gave up my job. I became a personal trainer, then I became a triathlon coach, and that's what I do full time now. I'm a qualified personal trainer, a British Triathlon level 3 coach, a Training Peaks coach. I'm a certified mental health and exercise coach. I'm incredibly passionate about the power of exercise to help build our mental health. And I'm also an accredited life coach, because we all know, well, we often know the things that we want to do, the changes we want to make in terms of exercise, in terms of nutrition. We're not so good at necessarily making those changes happen. So I trained as a life coach to help my clients to make those changes. In terms of my own training, I've done age group, Europeans and Worlds, representing Team GB at Europe, Olympic distance and middle distance. I finally fulfilled a goal for the last decade of qualifying for Kona last year. I went out and raced in Kona last year. I've also done lots of audaxing and cycle bikepacking racing. I've been an expert lead on endurance and triathlon for Virgin Active, for Run Mummy Run, for Women in Tri. I am part of a group, there's a few people in the chat here, and Frankie, who's helping me on the chat, from the Yorkshire and Humber Supporting Women and Girls in Triathlon Network, which is a BTF supported network. We'll tell you more very quickly, give you a link for that at the end if you want to find out more. I'm an incredibly passionate club coach. I've been head coach for 4 different tri clubs, I think. And I work with clients on a one-to-one basis. I also have a membership, and I have strength and conditioning online sessions for women female runners and triathletes. That's what I'm trying to say. So that's a quick introduction to me and where I'm coming at from this. Let's go into some guidelines for women to get the most from their training. So first of all, why am I doing a specific session? Why do women need to have a specific session on their training? Well, as I think we all know, hormones affect our lives, they affect our bodies, they affect our training. 1 in 3 of us have missed work due to our menstrual cycle. 88% of us say that the menstrual cycle symptoms have limited our exercise performance. So they're clearly having a big impact on our lives. Yet most exercise and nutrition guidelines are based on men. Up until the 90s, women of childbearing potential were excluded from medical research. So all of the guidance we have in medical research and then from that exercise and nutrition guidance was based on men. And this is still the case, although that's changed since the 90s. And now, if you want to research just on men, you have to justify that in your funding applications. That still pervades. And we still have a situation where 31, I think it's gone up to 34% now, but yeah, roughly a third of research is done just on men. Yet we know, and this was originally because of concerns about, the damage to the unborn fetus, but now it's because it's really hard to do research on women. If you're doing research on women, you have to control for the menstrual cycle because of the worry that the hormones that we have through that menstrual cycle will impact on the research. My argument is if that is enough to impact on the research, surely we need to do the research so we know what that impact is, so we can take that into account in our own training and our own exercise. Yet still, we only have about 6% of research done just on women. Again, I think that's gone up to 8% now, but it's still a very small proportion of research done just on women. Yet we are 50% of the population. We're the only ones that have a menstrual cycle. We're the only ones that go through menopause. We need to know more about how these things affect our body. And because we live in this male-dominated world in terms of exercise guidelines, nutrition guidelines, everything is done through the male lens. So, for example, an audit of strength training guidelines found that 70% of the participants that were informing those guidelines were men. Yet we all know that on average, men are stronger than women. So it's absolutely ridiculous that 70% of the people we're looking at to inform those guidelines are men. Those guidelines aren't going to be relevant or not as relevant as they could be for women. Take the example of a marathon. It's really common in kind of recreational running for people to go, oh, I really want to get that sub 4-hour marathon. That is achieved by 43% of male runners. So almost a half of male runners, that's a goal worth kind of, that they could reach. But only 21% of female runners get a sub 4-hour marathon. So 80% of women are setting themselves up for this goal. I'm not saying that everybody's trying to get that sub 4-hour marathon, but 80% of women aren't going to get that goal. Yet we have that societal pressure, that pressure we put on ourselves to try and get that sub 4-hour marathon, or take a couch to 5K plan. Again, women on average run slower than men. A lot of women never get to 5K on a couch to 5K plan, which leads to women feeling like we failed, or leads to us pushing harder than we should, risking injury and things. So all of these guidelines, this world of exercise and nutrition guidelines based on men, lead to women feeling like we're constantly failing, or we risk injury because we're pushing harder than we could or we should. It affects our confidence. And often it's not that the problem isn't us, it's that the advice just hasn't been tailored to women. I'll get off my high horse now and calm down. So another reason that we need a specific session for women, there's lots of things that affect women in different ways or more than men. So Alzheimer's, for example, we're twice as likely to get Alzheimer's than men. 20% of women will get Alzheimer's. Depression and anxiety, there's a 2-to-1 ratio of the number of women to men affected. Autoimmune diseases affects, of those who have autoimmune diseases, 80% are women. Osteoporosis, 80% are women. So all of these things are, there's a stronger risk of having these conditions if we're female, but so many of them can be improved or the risk reduced through exercise or diet. Yet how often are we given female-specific guidance, or how often are we talked about these issues through a female lens? Now, it's really easy to see all those stats and go, oh, God, this isn't fair, or, oh, I'll just give up now. The dice is loaded against me. But the reason I want to do this talk is because there's something that you can do about it. It's so easy to hear those stats and just get despondent, but you have a choice. You can go, it's not fair, and kind of give up, or you can choose to accept that there are some things which affect us worse or affect us differently, but you can also choose to take the opportunity to act, to change things. And that's what I want this talk to be about, to give you the information so you know what you can do to make a difference. And you've got the advantage by the fact that you're here. I'm guessing that you are already an active woman. And so you're already doing a lot of the things that I'd recommend. You're already on that pathway. It's a hell of a lot harder if you're not even active in the first place to start adding exercise and some of the things I'll talk about in. And the other advantage is that if we make these changes, it helps our performance as well. And then finally, knowledge is power. So if we build up our awareness, we can get the most from our body by working with our body rather than constantly feeling like we're fighting against our body. It helps us to advocate for ourselves. We can go in to speak to a coach, to a GP with confidence, knowing the questions to ask. Whereas if we keep the taboo, which I think isn't nearly as much of a taboo as it used to be, but there's still, a bit of a taboo about talking about things like menstrual cycle, like perimenopause and things, that's denying us that power to make those changes and that knowledge. So this is about pulling back the curtain, talking about these things. Okay, so what are the recommendations that I would make for women to take into their training? Number one, to get to know their body. Number two, to fuel their training and health. And number three, to future-proof your body. So let's go into all of those in a little bit more detail. Before I do, just to say, I'm going to hit you with a lot of information today. Like I said, if anybody wasn't here at the beginning, there's a lot here. This is coming from a talk that is part of a course that I do, which has got 5 modules to it on how to train as a woman, how to get the most out of your training and work with your body. So there's lots in here. I've tried to stuff it all in because I don't want to miss anything out in case it's the one thing that's relevant for you. But remember, you don't need to do it all. Some of it won't be relevant to you at all. You can discard that. The stuff that is relevant to you, don't try and make all the changes at one time. You'll get overexhausted, you'll do it for a week, and then you'll give up. And so instead, you've got a worksheet or a sheet that's going to summarize everything I talk about today. Keep that on one side, make one change. Then when you've got that change kind of solidified, you go back to the worksheet, you find the next change you want to make. Don't try and do everything in one go. So looking at knowing your body, first of all, looking at menstruating or premenopausal women. The first thing to say is that our menstrual cycle, rather than seeing it as this, oh God, I've got my period, let's see our menstrual cycle as a vital sign, a sign, like the signs that doctors look at to see how healthy you are. Having your menstrual cycle shows that your body is healthy. It is not normal. It used to be seen as a kind of badge of honor. I think this is changing, but not entirely. It used to be seen as a badge of honor that you'd lose your period if you were training enough. That is not normal. It is not okay. If we lose our period when we're training, and not because we're approaching perimenopause or something, it is a serious risk. It is of concern. If we lose our menstrual cycle while we're training, particularly if it starts to happen as we increase our training, it's a sign, not necessarily, but it's a sign that we could be going into low energy availability or reduced, which can ultimately lead to reduced energy deficiency syndrome in sports, which is a serious concern. When we get to this, it's affecting our hormones, it's affecting our recovery, it's particularly affecting our bones, which can lead to problems in later life. It's not something you want to be messing with. So if you are worried that you've lost your period as you go, as training ramps up, it's something to definitely speak to your GP about to rule out any other causes, but also to see if it is potentially that you've got low energy availability being the main issue there. Something to speak to your coach if you have one as well. A lot of people say to me, but that can't be the case because I haven't lost weight. You don't necessarily need to be losing weight. It's about nutrition timing. It's about making sure we've got enough energy coming in around our training. So we want to make sure we've got that energy balance right. We've got enough energy coming in, enough fuel to fuel our training. I'll talk more about that in a second. So yeah, so number one, let's see that menstrual cycle as something to celebrate, to show that our body's healthy. And if we haven't got that menstrual cycle and it's not because we're approaching perimenopause or we're into post-menopause, then see it as something to act on. For those of you who do have a menstrual cycle, the better you get to know yourself, the better you can work with your body. So recommendation number one, if you're not already, is to start tracking your cycle. Not just when you bleed, but the symptoms that occur. When I say track, you can use one of the apps, or personally, I'm a fan of just getting out a notebook and writing things down because it's a lot easier to look back on your notes. You want to learn things like your cycle length, your patterns of that cycle length of the cycle, your good and bad days for training, when your energy is higher, when your energy is lower, when the perceived effort changes, if your body responds differently to heat throughout the cycle. Get to know when certain injuries tend to flare up, whether that's injuries and niggles or whether it's things like stomach aches, headaches. Get to know changes in your recovery demands. Do you recover better at certain times of the month? And do your metrics, things like resting heart rate, HRV, your heart rate while you're training, if you track those things, do they change throughout your cycle? And get to know which foods affect you. Do certain foods lead to more or less bloating? Do certain foods give you more or less energy? These are all things that can change through your cycle. And the more that you know them, the easier you can then work with your body to get the best out of your body. Once you've done that tracking, and I'd say do it for at least 3 months to start to see patterns rather than just a one-off view, get to know what works best for you. So I recommend that all women take a rest week in their training. I recommend all women take a rest day, but also a rest week. I recommend everybody does, not just women. Everybody takes a rest week. That's every 3 or 4 weeks. And it doesn't mean you do nothing. It just means your training goes down a little bit, the volume goes down, the intensity goes down so your body can recover. If you have a menstrual cycle that affects how you feel, then I would put that rest week in time with your training. So when you feel that you're least able to train, you're least able to get the most out of your training, that's when you take your rest week. In terms of the rest of your training, some people are very into cycle syncing, doing certain types of weightlifting at certain times of the month, doing endurance training at certain times, power training at other times of the month. If that works for you, go for it. There's not much evidence to say that it makes a difference in terms of performance. And in terms of women I work with, we have enough jobs just trying to get everything into our training plan. So trying to change it by the week just is too much normally. But you might find that you have a week where you're feeling stronger. Make sure that that's the week where you really go for those kind of harder sessions, although you might want to avoid doing something like testing because you'll then have to keep to those results through the rest of the month. But get to know your body, know how it responds. But the biggest thing is to know when you feel less able to train, you go easier on yourself. I would put that rest week in there, but even if you don't want to take the rest week, just make sure you're not beating yourself up because you failed a session. It's just that your hormones weren't playing ball that day. Check your race dates. Are you likely to be at that worst phase of your menstrual cycle when your race is? If so, then I would start to tweak that rest week. And in fact, I would be training through your worst days of the menstrual cycle so that you know how your body responds. Get to know the triggers that can make those symptoms worse so that you can minimize them, whether that's diet, exercise, stress. Get to know if you're fueling, your hydration, your recovery demands change, especially if you respond differently to the heat. So do train through those worst days so you know how you can then be in control on race day. You know how your body's going to respond. The good news is normally it feels harder, but we don't actually perform worse. It will obviously depend on you and your symptoms. But get to know your body so you can work with it. And then just to stress again, watch out for any of those changes in your menstrual cycle, particularly if you're starting to lose or have a significant delay to your cycle. And if your symptoms are really bad, and don't go what your mum and your sister say is normal, because often these things are genetic. If you have really bad symptoms around your menstrual cycle, see a GP. There's so many conditions that are so not well known. They're becoming increasingly well known, but that can affect how badly we have those symptoms through the menstrual cycle. And if it's really bad, see a GP and press to get some support there. Now, if you don't have a period, if you're still menstruating, but you might be on the coil or something, you don't have a period, you can still track your symptoms and patterns, even though you don't have a bleed. You can still get to know the better or worse days for training, whether certain injuries flare up at certain times. Do bear in mind when we were talking about that period being a vital sign to show that your body is healthy. If you're on hormonal contraception and you get that breakthrough bleed, it's not a period. So it's not that vital sign. So if you don't have an actual natural period, we need to be especially vigilant about that energy availability. And that would apply to those of us in perimenopause as well. So quick recap on menstrual cycles. It is a vital sign. So let's celebrate it when it comes. It means our body is in healthy working order and we're fueling ourselves well enough. Track your cycle, get to know the patterns of your body. And then once you've done that tracking, look at adapting your training to work with your body. If you lose your menstrual bleed, speak to your GP and or your coach. And if you have particularly bad symptoms from your menstrual cycle, then make sure you speak to a GP to get support. And Frankie's just shared, lots of primary care settings have a women's health specialist GP. So it's worth seeing somebody if you have one. Really, thank you, Frankie, good point there. So number 2, for peri and postmenopausal women. So first of all, just a few quick definitions. I think people mostly know these by now, but menopause is a point in time, a singular point in time. It marks a year without a period. In the UK, that most commonly occurs around 51 years, but it can range from 45 to 55, and we're not all average. It can vary by race. Some people have a much earlier menopause, and if you do, then that's definitely worth speaking to your GP about, because you might need additional support because you've gone into menopause sooner. Then we have the phase before menopause, sorry, after menopause, no, get started. We have the phase before menopause, which is our perimenopause. This is the point at which our hormones start changing. So we enter that menopause transition. On average, it lasts for 4 years. It can be over 10 years, 10 years of joy. It affects about 20% of people, 20% of women won't have any symptoms at all. 80% of women do experience symptoms and 25% have severe symptoms. I tend to work more with the people who have those severe symptoms. But yeah, you might get through without symptoms, but it is quite common you'll have at least something. And then postmenopause is the rest of your life. So everything I'm going to talk today about the impact, a lot of those continue, but we're not getting the fluctuation. We're not getting that constant changing. So it sort of settles down, but the long-term health impacts I'm talking about do continue. So in terms of what those symptoms are, and I'm not going to read through all of these because there's hundreds on here, but there are lots of symptoms. And I think it's important to share these because if you're not yet at perimenopause, when you start to come into this, you can feel like your world, your body, your mind, your everything has gone upside down. And people commonly kind of talk about menopause as being about hot flushes and night sweats. It's important to know there are so many more symptoms than that so that you're aware, so that you can realize that's what's happening, partly because you might want to get support, but mostly just so you don't feel like your whole world has turned upside down and you don't know why. When I did a talk for Menopause Week last year, and I asked people what the most common symptoms affecting them were, by far, and this was a training population, but by far the biggest symptoms were things like fatigue and energy, impact on their sleep, impact on their joints, flares up of injuries and things. Hot flushes and night sweats were really low down. So don't just be looking for those as a symptom of menopause or perimenopause. It's much wider than that. In terms of the long-term risks, one of the biggest risks of menopause is that as we lose estrogen, as estrogen goes down throughout perimenopause into postmenopause, estrogen is protective of our muscles, our bones, and our joints. And so as it goes down, we start to potentially lose muscle mass, lose bone mass, and our joints become more vulnerable. Quick stat for you, 80% of those with osteoporosis in the UK are women. About 1 in 2 women over 50 will break a bone because of osteoporosis. And this isn't just, has a big impact on our life and on our training, but it can be life-threatening. So of those with a hip fracture, 10% die within a month and a third die within a year. So we want to look at what we can do to try and prevent that. We can't stop everything, but we can definitely do a lot to make a difference. And that's what we'll look at today. We also need to be aware that estrogen is protective of our heart. So as that starts to go down, we become more vulnerable to heart disease. So 1 in 14 UK women die from coronary heart disease, which is twice as many as those who die through breast cancer. We always think of heart disease as a male problem, and it is higher for them. I think it's 1 in 8 of men, but it's still a big risk for women. And it affects our mental health. So over 80% of perimenopausal women experience mental health issues, and 50 to 54 is the highest age bracket for women to have a suicide. I can't say that, I'll just read it. 50 to 54-year-old women have the highest suicide rate. So it has a real impact on our mental health. Now, again, it's easy to see a slide like that and go, well, that's just all crap. I want to give up now. It's not fair. And it's also, I find when I work with my perimenopausal clients that we go, particularly when we start things like putting on weight, we find the training's not working anymore. I said, people find that they're getting more and more tired. We tend to double down and go, well, I just need to do what I did before. I need to try harder. It worked before and I need to try harder. But we have to recognize we've got different hormones now or changed hormonal balance. So I would suggest rather than just trying harder, doing what we've always done, we need to work with our body in a new way. We need to accept that our hormones have changed. We need to accept that there are these risks, but we can also look for that opportunity, the opportunity to work with our body, to find how we can make our body the strongest, the most resilient it can be, to try and reduce the impact of those things that we were just looking on the slide there. And that means we have to choose to do something about it, choose to act. So again, I've talked about tracking when you've got a period, when you've got a menstrual cycle. As we go into perimenopause, we want to track again. We want to track our symptoms. We want to track our cycle. Again, get to know what that baseline is, spot patterns, learn how to listen to our body, learn what the triggers are that can make, things like bloating or headaches or, different things that we experience through perimenopause or experience more through perimenopause. Learn what triggers it. Learn how your body responds to exercise. We generally need to take more recovery. And so we need to learn what stresses our body and how much recovery it needs. It's definitely something to speak to your coach about if you're comfortable speaking to your coach about it. And again, you might want to speak to your GP about support, things obviously like HRT, but also if you don't want to take HRT, you can get things like vaginal estrogen if you have vaginal dryness that just works very locally, so it doesn't have that effect on your whole body, but that can make a massive difference for active women. Things like CBTI, so cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, can be really helpful to help with sleep. And obviously there's a range of mental health support. So speak to your GP to find out what support is there that can really help you get through some of the worst impacts of perimenopause. If you are on HRT as well, if it doesn't work for you the first time, on average, it takes 3 different goes, 3 different sort of tweaking that HRT to find what works for you. So don't just give up the first time if it doesn't work for you. So my big 3 to address the negative impact of menopause are, very surprisingly, exactly the same as what I said at the beginning for all women. It's that listening to your body, so tracking and learning how to work with your body, fueling your health and training, and strength and conditioning, which can help to future-proof your body. And that's what we'll go on and look at in a bit more detail now. So just recapping, for perimenopause, our actions are to choose to act. Remember, it's never too soon or too late. Often people, if you're watching this in perimenopause, menopause is a way off, and you go, oh, well, I don't need to worry about that yet. The sooner you act, the bigger reserves you're going to build up. And I can promise you, there is nobody who is going through the whole chaos of perimenopause who suddenly goes, oh, right, I've never done strength and conditioning before, but now I'm going to choose to start doing it when everything else in my life feels like it's gone haywire. Let's build those habits before we get to perimenopause, build up as much muscle and bone reserves as we can, and build up those habits. But it's also never too late. There's so many studies showing that women, postmenopausal women, have started adding in strength training, made changes to their diet, and it can have a fundamental difference. So choose to act. Track your symptoms and your patterns so you get to know your baseline, you get to know what impacts on you, what helps, what hinders you, what makes those symptoms flare up more. Focus on your recovery and listening to your body. We need to make sure we take enough recovery as we go through menopause. We need more recovery and we need to work with our body to get that. We need to make sure we eat enough and we need to do that strength training. So let's talk a bit more about that fueling. Recommendation number 1. Make sure we are getting enough protein. Protein is what preserves our muscle, preserves our bone, and muscle, that stronger muscle and stronger bone is going to help us to avoid injury. But it's more than that. It's helping us to make hormones. It's important for every process going on in our body. So we need to make sure we get enough protein. Now, normal UK adults, the guideline is 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight a day. For somebody who is active, that goes up to 1.6, and somebody who is in peri to post-menopause, that would also increase because we are, as the estrogen goes down and we become more vulnerable to losing muscle and bone mass, we need to do everything we can to protect it, and protein is protecting it. So aim for that 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. Try and get in 30 grams at every meal, and try and get in 30 grams of protein immediately pre or post training. Our body has a better ability to take it up, and as women, we're particularly vulnerable if we don't get it in soon enough. So try and get in that 30 grams pre or post training. That's where things like a shake or a bar can be really useful, just to help get you to those targets for the day, but also just quick and convenient. So think for yourself, how close are you? Tomorrow, maybe just have a look at everything you eat in a day and see how close is it to that 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight. Next recommendation, and I probably have never worked with a woman who this hasn't been an issue for. We need to fuel our training, and we need to fuel our training with carbs. We have this thing that carbs are a dirty word, that carbs are bad for us. Carbs are not bad for us, particularly if we are endurance training. We burn carbs, carbohydrates, when we do endurance training. So we need to put that energy into our body. In terms of when you need to fuel your training, if you've been fasting, so that includes overnight, if you've eaten your last meal and then you've got up the next day, haven't eaten overnight, then you have been fasting. So if you're training first thing in the morning, it doesn't mean you have to have a full breakfast, but you want to get something carbohydrate based that's easy for your body to absorb so that you don't need to sort of have a big rest before you then get training. So something like baby rice pudding, a banana, some raisin toasts, those can all be really simple things that you can have just before or during your training. If you're doing a session that's over 60 minutes or high intensity, you're going to burn through your stored available reserves faster. So you want to build in that, you want to add more carbs in there. If it's less than that, so if it's less than 60 minutes, if it's not high intensity, if it's not first thing in the morning, then you don't need to fuel your training. But if you're constantly fatigued, if you're constantly making limited progress, or if you're constantly getting injured, then my first recommendation would be to try fueling your training. We're not talking about creating a calorie surplus. Women are so, we relate exercise subconsciously or consciously, we relate exercise to burning calories. And so it feels alien to us to take in calories in order to do the training. But I can promise you it will help you get so much more from your training. I can't tell you the number of people I've worked with who have really, really struggled with it. But when we finally cracked it, they're just like, oh my God, I can do my training. It feels so much easier. I'm making progress and I can come back and I can play with the kids or I can get on with everything else that day. It can make such a difference. So if you're not already fueling your training well, then please, please give it a go. If you're under fueling your training, you risk being hungry. So A, that's not pleasant, but B, you probably then come home and eat 10 times more because you feel hungry afterwards. But you're risking injury because your body doesn't have enough energy to recover with, because potentially it's starting to break down the muscle to give itself the energy for the session you're doing. You're going to make less progress because you're not fueling your adaptations from your training. It'll be harder to be adapted to racing. If you plan to use gels or something on race day, you need to train your stomach to get used to taking in carbohydrate. And you risk pushing yourself into that low energy availability or the red state that we talked about at the beginning, with all the consequences for your health, for your bones. In contrast, fueling well supports you to train harder. You're putting more energy in, you can do more, helps you to recover better, so you feel better, but it also leads to more adaptations. You get stronger, your performance improves. And like I say, you feel better, you enjoy it more. So give it a go, fueling your training. Building on from that, and as I've said, carbs aren't bad in capital letters. Outside of fueling for racing or fueling for training, something outside of stuff we're going to eat specifically because we're about to do a training session, we want to try and move away from refined carbs to whole foods. So carbs aren't bad, but a lot of refined carbs in our diet can be a health risk. So moving to those more whole foods, your grains, your pulses, adding maybe some fats or protein in along with your carbs means we get more sustained energy release, so we don't get the highs and the lows. It's more satiating, so we feel fuller. It's more nutritionally dense. So you're getting more nutrition in to support your whole body health as well as support your training. It's less inflammatory. So particularly those of you who have issues around your menstrual cycle, when we menstruate, that's an inflammatory process. Often changing or reducing the amount of refined carbs we eat at that point can really help with those symptoms. There's loads of studies linking a more whole food diet with better mental health. And then over the long term, it can help to reduce our chance of diabetes, of cancers, particularly Alzheimer's. If we have a high carb diet, it can make us a lot more vulnerable to Alzheimer's. So let's try and change some of those stats we looked at the beginning, saying how women are more vulnerable to Alzheimer's. Exercise helps, and changing or reducing the amount of refined carbs in our diet can help. That's the wrong slide there. That should, is it? No, it isn't. Sorry. It's the right slide. So in terms of just going a little bit further into fueling, some common risk areas, we've talked about bone health. So we are more vulnerable to osteoporosis, to weaker bones, because we lose the estrogen through perimenopause. Some things we can do to support it, making sure we're getting enough calcium, making sure we're getting enough vitamin D, reducing smoking and alcohol. In terms of iron, we're more vulnerable to iron deficiency anemia. Obviously, if we menstruate, we're losing a lot of blood, but contraception can have an impact, a negative impact on our blood reserves, and as can menopause. So we're more likely to be iron deficient. If you think you are, don't just start supplementing, get a blood test so that you can find out what the situation is. Do you need to be taking it at all? Do you need something higher strength that might be prescribed by your doctor? In terms of perimenopause, as I've said, fuel your training, fuel your training, fuel your training. A lot of women, because we start to put on weight, it's really common to gain weight, and particularly gain weight around the stomach. As we go through perimenopause, a lot of women then start doing fasted training or try and cut back on what they're eating. If you do that, your body goes into a kind of it sees a threat. You're not getting enough fueling in. And so it goes, oh my God, she wants me to train and she's not giving me any energy. Right, I'm going to hold on to what I've got. And it holds on to it. So potentially we end up losing less weight or putting on weight because our body's holding on to what it's got. It raises the stress hormones. We have more sensitivity to stress hormones around our middle. So we start putting on more fat reserves around our middle, which we don't like the look of, but is also potentially dangerous in terms of our health. Whereas if we fuel what we're doing, but as I say, move to that more whole food diet, then that can really help to help with the weight loss, or certainly help to improve insulin sensitivity. It can also, a Mediterranean diet has been shown to help with hot flushes, with brain fog, even with sleep and depression. Some other supplements to consider in perimenopause: creatine can be really helpful in terms of brain fog, and it can also help with our muscle strength. And magnesium can be helpful, particularly around sleep in perimenopause. So recapping on fueling points there. Make sure we're eating enough protein, 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight, around 30 grams in every meal and 30 grams within 30 minutes of training. Make sure we're fueling our training, particularly if we've been fasting, so overnight, if it's a session that's above 60 minutes or if it's a high intensity session. And remember that carbs aren't bad, but we want to try and avoid refined or processed carbs and instead aim towards Mediterranean diet. I've seen a question come up about iron, but it's too much detail to read now. I'll come back to it in the Q&A. So third point, we want to future-proof our body. And again, this is where we talk about strength and conditioning, and people go, oh yeah, but I can't quite do it now, I'll do it later. My question to you is, if not now, then when will you? It's well known, especially, well, runners and triathletes as well. A lot of us don't like doing strength and conditioning, but it is well known to improve our performance in terms of our running, in terms of our triathlon, whatever your sport is. Loads of reasons there. I won't read through them all, but it will help your performance, but also it has wider benefits as well. It's, as we've talked about, it preserves and builds muscle, which is really important for us as women because we're vulnerable to losing it as the estrogen declines. Muscle is really important for body composition, for fat loss. If we have more muscle reserves, we burn through the calories faster. It raises our metabolic rate, but also muscles where we store glucose. So it can support our metabolic rate. It can help to reduce that, the carb crashes up and down. It can help to regulate our blood sugar and therefore reducing the chance of things like type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and Alzheimer's. It can improve our bone density, so reducing that risk of osteopenia and osteoporosis. It can help us with our posture. This is a bit where everybody starts to sit up better, which is important for injury, in preventing injuries. It also helps us look better rather than being kind of stooped over. And there's so many links of posture to mental health in terms of feeling confident. But we need to have that muscle there to allow us to hold that good posture. It's linked to longevity, so helping us to age healthier and better, leading to greater independence later in life. I've already said it improves confidence, body image, but also mental resilience. If we know we can do hard things in the weight room or, body weight exercises, whatever, it builds that mental resilience and it supports our brain. So there's loads of studies to show how it reduces the risk of Alzheimer's and can slow cognitive decline. I'm not going to talk through this next slide. There's loads of detail on there. You can take a photo of it. You're getting all these slides through afterwards as well. But that is a quick summary of what I would recommend you're including in your strength and conditioning. So we want to be doing strength and conditioning, ideally twice a week. But if you're not doing it yet, don't let that go, oh, I can never do twice a week. Start with 10 minutes. Start with 5 minutes. Start with where you're at, and then you can build up from there. Now, if you want some support on your strength and conditioning, I do have an online strength and conditioning class. We have live classes just for women on a Thursday morning, and then I record the sessions and add them up to my website each week. If you're interested in some support with your strength and conditioning, then if you use that code, you will get a 50% discount on your first month. There's a free trial, I think a 2-week or 1 week, I can't remember, free trial for the on-demand sessions anyway on my website. This will all be on the link I'll send through afterwards. So if you're interested in some support with your strength and conditioning, everything I talked about on that previous slide is built into the sessions that we do in those sessions. But as a quick summary, in terms of future-proofing your body, we want that strength training 2 to 3 times a week. Ideally, we want heavy weights, so the kind of weights where you can only do 5 to 8 reps. Now, if you don't have heavy weights at home, you might want to consider going to the gym. If you don't want to go to the gym, don't go, oh, well, I can't do it, that's no good. do what you can. Something is always better than nothing. But if you can start to build up towards using heavier weights, even better. As triathletes and runners, we want to prioritize the lower body. As women, we like doing our arms, we want our shapely arms. But from a performance point of view and from a health and longevity, we spend most of our time walking around on our legs, not on our arms. So we want to prioritize the lower body. So things like squats, deadlifts, and lunges. We want to mobilize our key joints. So things like our hips, our ankles, our thoracic spine, our shoulders. We want them all to move well. So we want to do mobility exercises to mobilize them. And then we want to stabilize key joints like our calves, our glutes, our core, our pelvic floor, and our shoulders. And then we want to add in some plyometrics work to help strengthen our bones. And we want to add in some balance work because balance gets worse as we get older. And if our balance goes, we fall over, which means we might twist an ankle. We might take some time out of our training. So it's not going to help our performance. But also long term, that can be, risking breaking those bones. So we want to keep training our balance. So that's the main stuff done. I'm just going to go through a few other sort of common issues, things that I see particularly affecting women in terms of running and triathlon. So first of all, kit. Kit, again, is mostly designed for men, and then sometimes they make it pink and give it to us as women. There's very little kit that is designed for women. A well-fitted sports bra can save you a mile over a marathon. Listen to that again. That means that when you are running a marathon, while everybody else has to go to mile 26, you finish at mile 25. That is massive. So make sure, if you haven't already, that you get a well-fitted sports bra. In terms of recommendations, I asked my clients a few years back, and there's some makes on there were the ones that they particularly recommended, particularly for women with bigger boobs, that they found helped them, gave them the most support. That's the same as a 4% improvement that you get on your Vaporflies or, your sort of magic shoes. So if you haven't already invested in a good bra and you have got your magic shoes, think about investing in that bra. In terms of cyclists, have you had a bike fit, or do you know that your bike fits you? Again, bikes are so often designed for men, and sometimes they get made a bit smaller, but it hasn't changed all the proportions. So things like, is the bike actually too big for you? But particularly, does the saddle fit you? Is the handlebar width okay for you? Men have wider shoulders. So if we have a men's bike, we've often got our hands too wide, which can lead to shoulder injuries. Or we have to put a shorter stem on because we can't reach the handlebars. Can you reach the drops? I can't tell you the number of female cyclists I've worked with when we're trying to do descending, and I would always recommend getting down on the drops for descending, but they feel that they can't reach the brakes. So your bike needs to fit you. If you're getting soft tissue pain, so pain down there, don't accept it. Some male saddles, I've got a male saddle, it works brilliantly for me. That's after years of trying lots of different saddles though. So try lots of different saddles. A lot of shops will let you try them before you buy them. Take it for a decent long ride. Make sure that it fits you. Use a chamois if you're cycling. So cycling shorts with a chamois. Don't wear your underwear underneath. And make sure you wash that chamois after every use so you don't get bacteria building up that can lead to saddle sores. And again, vaginal dryness is never talked about, but it's really common. Up to 30% of women pre-menopause are affected, over 50% after menopause. You can get creams, you can get lubricants, and you can, as I say, get local vaginal estrogen that can make a real difference. It can make such a difference for cyclists, for runners. So if you are suffering from vaginal dryness, speak to your GP about it. Mindset. So this I could talk for hours and hours and hours about. It's a massive passion of mine. I'm going to try and keep it just to, I think it's 2 slides here. So females, this is common to lots of people, but I would say particularly common with female clients. There's so much of the inner critic. There's so much of the comparisonitis, so much of the words that come out of our mouths, but also that are just in our minds are, I can't, or everyone's better than me, everyone's faster than me, everyone's thinner than me. Body comparison, dissatisfaction with our body, my arms, my tummy, my thighs, my everything is too fat, or just that I'm not good enough. So ask yourself, how familiar are those thoughts? Are those thoughts that are commonly going through your head? And if they are, and in fact, one of the a male coach who's signed up to this talk, I'm not sure if he's on here now, but he said from his experience, he wanted to know how he can help women grow their full potential. Something that he noticed in coaching male athletes is he has to pull them back to reality when it concerns goals. Whereas in the women he coached, it tends to be the opposite. And that's exactly what I see as well. that women always think we can't do something, whereas men are, they're pushing ahead, thinking they can't even when they can't, thinking they can even when they can't. So if you are having thoughts like that, ask yourself, do those thoughts help you? Are they helping you feel happier on a day-to-day basis? Are they helping you get your training done, perform, achieve the things you want to achieve in life? And I would say generally they are not. If you're trying to do something hard and there's somebody shouting on the side going, you can't do that, you're crap, you're not good enough, it's not going to help you. So why would you have that thought going through your mind? In terms of how to address it, I can't, in the time we've got, go into all the kind of tools and tips for addressing that mindset. But just be aware that 90% of our thoughts, our behaviors, our decisions, and our emotions come from our subconscious mind. So we have the same thoughts repeated each day. Every time you need to make a decision about something, you might not even notice that decision, but your mind goes through a kind of like a filing cabinet in your mind, and it goes, what's the top thing in the drawer? And it pulls out the answer. It doesn't look to the bottom of the drawer. It just comes to that top answer. And if that top answer is, I can't, I'm not good enough, that's the answer it comes from. And those thoughts lead to behaviors, which lead to outcomes. So each time you think you can't do something, I can't remember what the thing is. If you think you can't, you can't. If you think you can, you can. So choose to change your thoughts. We can start changing those thoughts. If we become aware of our thoughts, we can choose to change them. As I say, that's a whole different discussion, but be aware of the power of your thoughts, for good and for bad. And then finally, looking at our nervous system, touching very briefly on neurodiversity and stress. So be aware, as people who are here listening to this, I'm guessing that you're all people who exercise. And all of us, I think, know that exercise can be a real powerful stress reliever. It can really help our mental health. But we have to be aware that exercise can also add to stress. Exercise is a stress. It's a good stress. Our body adapts to it. It gets stronger. But if we're already at a point where we are exhausted by the rest of life and we put training in, that is not going to help us. So women have a much higher proportion of women than men suffer from chronic fatigue, ditto autoimmune diseases. Neurodiversity is something which has been much more highly recognized in women now than it was in the past, because all of the criteria for diagnosis were based on men. We're now recognizing how much it does affect women, and also recognizing the massive or potentially massive hormonal interplay and crossovers. So things like ADHD, the kind of worst impacts of ADHD can really flare up in the run up to your period, ditto as we go through perimenopause. So there's loads of crossovers, and then for women. But then we also have, especially ADHD tends to be much more common in people who exercise, not because exercise brings it on, but because it can be a really good outlet for ADHD. So we have a situation where we have more and more women who are exercising, who may have ADHD. I think it's 8% of athletes have ADHD compared with 2% in the general population. I think that 2% is going to be very soon updated a hell of a lot, but still we know that it's more likely that we'll be affected by ADHD if we are exercising. Sorry, that's a long, complicated point to get to the point that, and if we are neurodivergent, that we have a higher risk of burnout. Now, if we're already at that risk of burnout, we then might put perimenopause on top. We already know that we are more vulnerable to things like chronic fatigue, to autoimmune diseases. We are putting our nervous system in this situation where it is overstressed. So again, just another reminder to listen to our body, to be aware of the signs of burnout, particularly if you're neurodivergent, just because you're at that higher risk, or if you previously had a chronic fatigue or autoimmune disease, you're more at risk of it reoccurring. And listen to your body and watch out for it. And a plea to everybody to find non-exercise based ways to relieve stress and support your mental health. You may have to stop exercising at some point, either because of burnout or because of an injury, a health concern, whatever. Make sure you know other ways to support yourself. Otherwise, you are so vulnerable that you lose exercise at the time that you feel like you need it most. I'm not going to talk through the menstrual and hormonal health conditions. I'm going to flick through the slides so you can have a look and see. As I say, you'll get all these handouts afterwards. These are all things which are more and more commonly recognized than before, but still, if you think you're affected by these things, you will have to fight for a diagnosis. On average, it takes 9 years to be diagnosed with endometriosis. I think that's changing as there's more awareness, but these are things that we really it's worth knowing about. These are things I was saying at the beginning. If you have impacts from your, if you have like a harder period than your friends do, it's worth going to the doctor about. So if you think you are affected by any of those things, track, so you know for yourself, so you don't think, oh my God, I'm going mad. So many women with PMDD, which is where you get like a really, really bad PMS, think that they're just, falling apart. And once you realize it's your menstrual cycle, yes, it means you're destined to have it once every 4 weeks or whatever, but at least you know why it's happening, that it will come to an end. So track so you know for yourself, but also track because that's your evidence to take to a GP or a consultant if you see them. Know your baseline so you know what your normal is, so you can see when it changes. Don't base what is normal on your mother or your sister because they're genetically related to you, and a lot of these things are genetic. And make sure you really advocate for yourself if you go and see a GP. Take a friend with you if you need to. Take that evidence of how your body's been affected. So I'm not going to recap on all of the points there. I'm going to give you the top line recap. Know your body, listen to your body, work with your body. Fuel your training and fuel your health. Make sure you're getting enough protein and enough carbohydrates, and future-proof your body with that strength and conditioning. There's a summary of all of that on the sheet, which, as I say, I'll send out to you with the recording at the end. But please, please, please don't try and act on everything in one go. Act on one thing at a time, bed that in, and then move on to the next thing. And breathe. So I got lots of questions in. As I said at the beginning, I'm going to overrun. I'm really sorry, but I got so many questions in. What I'm going to do is say to those of you who are on the call now, if you want to type in any questions, and I'll have a quick scan up of what's already been posted in there. Those of you who submitted them in advance who I haven't already answered, I'm going to stay on the recording and answer all of these. So even if you need to leave at 1, not a problem, absolutely understand. But you'll get the recording through, which will have all the questions on at the end. So pop your question into the chat now if you haven't already asked it. If it's something you sent before, hopefully I've got it here and I will answer it. While you're popping any questions into the chat, and do keep them related to women's training. I could talk to the cows come home about anything to do with training and mental health and everything, but I'm going to try and keep it just to things specifically related to women's training. While you're popping anything into the chat, I'll just quickly say, as I say, I'm not taking on new clients at the moment at all, but if you're interested in finding out more about me and how I work with my clients and the advice that I can give, I have a blog, which sometimes I update. But if you look through the archives on there, there's loads and loads of resources in there to support lots of the things I've been talking about today. My website's feelfitwithlucy.co.uk, and you go to /blog. Again, you'll get all these links when I send out the recording. Sometimes I post things on social media, sometimes I don't. When I get round to it, I do. I'm at Feel Fit with Lucy on social media. If you are interested in signing up to my membership, as I say, I'm not taking on new clients at the moment, but I have a wait list. So sign up to that and you'll know as soon as I start taking on new people. That should be within the next few months. I also have a newsletter, which again, sometimes I send out. I won't be spamming you. I'm not very good at writing my newsletter, but again, I try and send stuff out to that. So if you want to hear more about all of this, then follow me or sign up on one of those places. That's just a quick kind of what goes on in the membership. So you get lots of masterclasses, you get a Q&A, you get one-to-one calls, you get the strength and conditioning I talked about all included. There's an accountability club, loads of great stuff in there. So if you're interested in that, do sign up to the wait list. And there's a reminder on that code if you wanted the strength and conditioning sessions. So weekly strength and conditioning sessions. Also a quick plug, as I said right at the beginning, I'm part of a women and girls, what's it called? Yorkshire and Humber, supporting women and girls in triathlon in Yorkshire and Humber. And we are organising, or Frankie, who's on the call here particularly, is organising a stripped back park run this Saturday in Skipton. So if you're local to Skipton and you want to join us, do come along and join us. Frankie will hopefully put the link up in the chat now, but you can follow us, or if you don't want to come to the park run, but you want to find out more about the group, then you can follow us on our Instagram and Facebook page. There's the links there. Okay, let's go to questions. So I haven't seen anything flash up. Right. So
yeah, there's three, Lucy, that I took note of.
Amazing. Do you want to just say what they are rather than me trying to scroll through them?
So Linda asked, I tried creatine, but I get quite bloated and my bowels overworked. Does this pass? I stopped taking it due to this, but no, there are benefits.
Cool. So creatine, when you buy creatine has traditionally been used in a kind of bro science bulk put on muscle way. And so when you buy creatine, that's the recommendations you'll get are often based on that. So they'll talk about a 20 gram loading phase where you take 20 grams a day to load up on creatine. We don't need to do that. We're not loading up for a specific thing. We just want to build it up in our body generally. So we can go down to the lower dose of 3 grams. I'd have to say at this point, I'm not a nutritionist. I'm not qualified to give this advice, but I think this is fairly common advice. So we can go down to that 3 to 5 grams a day. Sip on it. So put it into a drink. I've got mine in here. Put it into a drink and sip on it throughout the day. If you down it in one go, it's all coming into your system in one go. So that's more for your system to deal with. So if you sip on it throughout the day, you go down to that 3 to 5 grams. That can help. Some people say certain makes, Crea Pure. I'm not got any affiliation with them. I've heard people recommending Crea Pure, as in Crea, like creatine and then pure on the end. I don't know. I haven't tried it myself. I certainly had issues when I first started taking it, but I've persisted with it and don't have any issues at all now. So I hope that helps. Well, what was the next one, Frankie?
So Karen asked, GPs often see ferritin test results as within normal range, so no supplementation needed, but the ferritin level is just above the lower margin for normal. Would you advise supplementation if your ferritin is normal but low, say below 50, especially if you are active and endurance training?
So what I would say, and again, I'm not a nutritionist, I'm not qualified to give this advice, and I'm going to step a little bit back more into my lane on this one. But what I would say is that normal levels, when you go to the GP, their normal levels are based on the normal population. Our normal population is chronically unhealthy in so many different ways. So we're almost kind of being dragged down to, that normal has lowered in lots of different things we look at. Normal, and I don't know specifically on iron, but has lowered over time because it's based on the average population. Secondly, it's based on an average. If you are somebody who is doing more demanding things of your body than a typical woman or man is, then you probably need higher iron reserves. We know that things like training can reduce it. There's impact-induced anemia. So actual training can break down the blood, the iron. So we end up, we're more vulnerable than the normal population. I can't give you the specific advice on those 50, the levels of 50 or not 50. I'm desperately trying to recall. I was listening to a podcast just the other day that was going into all the numbers and everything. It was the Feisty Performance Women's Podcast. Rearrange those words into Feisty Performance Women's Podcast. I think that's what it's called. And they certainly, the very first one in their latest series was talking about the numbers on there. So better to go to that and she can give you specific advice on that. But yes, I would say you probably want to push a bit harder than just being treated as a normal population.
Thank you. And Nikki asked, I'd love suggestions of something small I could eat before training. I eat a proper breakfast after training as I train at 6 a.m. most days and have done for years, but now I'm definitely perimenopausal and it sounds like I need to change this habit to fuel before training. Would a banana be enough?
Yep. Like try, and if you try more, like not the more you get in, but within reason, the more you can get in, the better. So yes, definitely try a banana, but have a banana, especially if it's something like a turbo session, you can have another banana sitting on the table there. So we can fuel before, we can also fuel during. If we're racing, we're going to have to fuel during, so we can get used to that. I'm not saying use gels and things. You could, they have a purpose, but I wouldn't be using gels year round because they're expensive. They're not good for our teeth. They're not good nutritionally. They're full of horrible stuff. But they definitely have a purpose. I do dried fruit and stuff if I'm on the turbo, not if I'm running. There's a bit too much fiber involved there, but so find things that work for you. I find that the baby rice that you just mix up with some water, ready bread, porridge if it works for you, rice pudding. A lot of people have oat intolerance, particularly as we go through menopause. So maybe rice rather than oats, but see what works for you. One slice or a few slices of raisin bread that you can just keep in the freezer and just get out. I live off, the Rice Crispy, what they called Kellogg Squares, the Rice Crispy bars. They got me through an Ironman. Like they're very light on your stomach, but high carbs. So find something that works for you. Experiment with different stuff. It doesn't have to just be before. It can be during if that works for you, particularly if it's a turbo or on a bike session. It's a bit easier than running. But yeah, try different stuff. But yes, a banana is good. Try 2 bananas, see if it's even better.
I fuel off the naked bars. They're always
Yeah.
quite good.
Yes, a lot of them, and I can't remember, like a lot of them are carbs. A lot of them, when
Mm.
they've got nuts in them as well, like you're wanting carbs more than protein. Protein afterwards, a bit of protein before as well can be really useful, but just look for the ones that are more of the fruit rather than the nuts to make sure you're getting enough carbs in there. Was that all
That
the
was it.
questions that were in
That was
advance?
all the questions. Yep. Nikki did follow up with questions about refined carbs, but I think you answered it in your answer.
Brilliant. Okay, I'm going to start going through the questions that I got in advance then. I'm just going to look down, or Frankie, will you let me know if anything else comes
I
in?
will. Yeah.
Thank you. And I absolutely understand everybody needs to leave. So as I say, I'll keep recording. I will answer all the questions so you'll get them through on the recording. Sorry for overrunning. Thank you for your time, everybody. Um, so in terms of the questions, and I'll say now, I did get more questions than this. I kept this specific to women's training and where there was a specific question rather than something I could talk for hours about just to keep to time. I'm also going to answer these in quick fire, and that's not fair because these questions deserve more than quick fire, but there just isn't time to answer them all in the depth that they deserve. So apologies in advance on that. So Jane asked, what's an alternative to squatting when you have one or both knees, which are worn and torn out? I've said that wrong, but you know what I mean. Um, so firstly, a lot of people when they squat could squat, if you change your technique, when we squat, particularly women, because we're anterior chain dominant, we're dominant with the muscles on the front of our leg, we end up with our knees going forwards. And that puts a lot of shearing force onto our knees, but it also means we're not recruiting our glutes, our bum muscles as much as we could and should. So trying to work on your technique. So you're sitting back into it more, pushing your feet out, maybe putting a thigh band around your knees to push out against, pushing your feet out so we recruit our glutes better, can often help take the strain off our knees. If, however, you've tried that and that's still too much, then you could try lunges. You could try something like the leg press machine or the leg extension machine in the gym just to strengthen your quads. So try different things, but certainly working on the technique can make a difference. Susan asked, she'd like to understand the basics of strength and conditioning. Does Pilates count? Do you need weights? So I think I've answered that one actually, but Pilates is definitely better than nothing. Pilates is brilliant for the stability and potentially the mobility stuff, which is absolute essential. So you've ticked a big box there. But in terms of the strength, no, we're looking for muscles. We're looking for really working those muscles. We're looking for doing an exercise where we can only do 5 to 8 safe reps. That doesn't mean 8 and you're about to collapse, but 5 to 8 safe reps and then you need to take a break. So that's where, yes, we do want to add in weights, but don't let that stop you. Do the Pilates, then try doing some body weight strength stuff, some squats, some lunges, things like that. And then see, can you get, places like Aldi always have, weights at this time of year, or Decathlon. You can get weights relatively cheaply if you've got somewhere to store them at home. Can you go to the gym so you've got access to more weight? So yes, ideally we want more weight, not just body weight, but start where you're at and build from there. Then there was lots of questions around managing life, kids, training, all the kind of things that get thrown at us and where we should sort of focus things. The first question was asking, what would you prioritize if you only had 3 hours? I would say, first of all, what's your goals? Because that will determine what you need to prioritize. From a health point of view, I would make sure at least one of those is strength and conditioning, or maybe 2 times 30-minute session strength and conditioning to make sure that you're getting that bone protection, that muscle protection. But beyond that, I'd ask, what do you enjoy? We need to make sure that we're looking after ourselves and we're doing things that we want to do because we'll do it more and because we'll get pleasure out of it. It sounds like your life is full on. So make sure you're doing things that you want to be doing. Also think in terms of kids, can you do things around kids? Can they come on the scooter while you go out for a run? Can you do things if they've got a club session? Can you train around that or whatever? Get creative and don't just look for those hours. Look for the 20 minutes, the 30 minutes where you can put in something effective, particularly strength and conditioning can fit in really well into those little moments. Quite a few questions on how often do we need rest days? When do we need to take rest days? I would take a rest day every week. That's partly, well, I recommend that for everybody, male, female, whatever. But again, thinking about as we go through perimenopause, so particularly if we are perimenopausal through to postmenopausal, it takes time for our bone to recover. When we train, we break down our bone, all parts of our body. And then as we recover, we rebuild it. If you break down your bone and then you don't recover and then you break down your bone again, that's when we start getting things like stress fractures and injuries coming in. So having that rest day, means that we're getting more time for recovery. I try and take a rest day between most running sessions, just because they're the ones that damage the bones the most, lead to the most risk. But yes, I think everybody should have a rest day once a week where for me, it's the not putting on lycra day. It's the day where I don't have to think about my training. It's a mental thing as well as a physical thing. It could be that you do some light yoga or something that day. It could be that you do a recovery swim, but a day where we're not working hard. And then, as I say, also a rest week every 3 to 4 weeks. Then lots of questions around race day. What if you're going to get your period on race day? So first of all, know for yourself, but for lots of people, it doesn't mean that you're going to race worse. Didn't say that very well, but there's not a lot of evidence to show that your period will affect performance. But you know for yourself, if you've got crippling cramps or whatever, then yes, it may well do. But get to know your body, know what triggers the bad symptoms. So things like nutrition, inflammatory foods, stress, all these things can mean we have worse cramps than we might otherwise have. So know your body, know what's going to help you the most. And also be kind to yourself and your expectations. If you know that you've got your period and you know it will have a negative impact on your training, don't expect to get the time that you would normally expect to get, because it might be holding you back. So treat yourself with kindness, have expectations based on the situation that you're in. And I think I said it already in the talk, but practice training through that period as you plan to on race day, with the nutrition you plan, with the kit you plan, all of that, so that you know how your body responds and you found the best solution for you. How to stop wanting to wee myself as soon as I run fast or longer distance. So we all need to train our pelvic floor, not just those of us who have had children, but we should all, as women, particularly active women, be training our pelvic floor. It's something I cover in the Club Feel Fit sessions. I'm not going to go through it in detail now, but so strengthening your pelvic floor, both the sort of long-term sustainable strength and the short, fast, if you sneeze type, being able to engage really quickly with all that different type of training in our pelvic floor. So that's number one, strengthen your pelvic floor. But then number two, and I don't think this is what's going on here, but there is a thing called urge incontinence. You know, if you've ever felt that, you've got back from a long cycle ride, you feel absolutely fine, then you start to put your key in your door and you're like, oh my God, I'm going to pee myself. Our mind starts to make that connection. And so we suddenly feel like we need a wee really urgently that we didn't 5 minutes before. I don't think that's what you're saying when you talk about as soon as I run fast or longer distance. I think that's more just about strengthening that pelvic floor, but bear in mind that could be going on there as well. Does a hormonal IUD affect your training? So yes, it can, but mostly in a positive way. So a hormonal IUD acts mostly locally rather than other contraception, which works more across your whole body. So it doesn't have as much an effect on your body. Other contraception, hormonal contraception, can have effects on your VO2 max, on your response to strength training, your response to your endurance training as well. The IUD won't have that impact. It can have a positive impact in that it can help make your menstrual symptoms less bad. And so that allows you more consistency in your training. You might lose your period altogether, and that can help in terms of your consistency in your training if you had bad symptoms beforehand. It can lead to reduction in motivation. It can lead to some weight gain. It can lead to some water retention, all of which could affect your training. Some of that doesn't last. It's at the beginning and then it gets better. So again, find out for yourself. But generally, on average, you may not be that woman who isn't in the average, but on average, it would normally have a positive effect if your menstrual cycle was interrupting your training in the first place. Then there's a question on training when your heart rate is higher than normal. So she said her periods have been a bit strange recently, and her heart rate was higher than normal on a recent run. And could that be perimenopause? So my first thing is, if your heart rate's higher than normal, that's normally a good indication that you're getting ill or potentially overtrained, although that tends to be that your heart rate will go lower. So know what your normal heart rate is for a given intensity. And if you see a change, my first assumption is, are you getting ill? She also said that she uses her watch rather than a chest strap to track heart rate. I don't trust the data that comes off a watch for resting heart rate or something, even for cycling maybe, but not for running, because generally it just jumps around too much. So it could be that. Change the battery in your watch, in your chest strap if you have one. Make sure it's not a technological issue. But yes, it could be perimenopause as well. And then that's just learning what's going on with your body. That's when you track and you find there's other symptoms. For me, I know that once my boobs start getting sore, then everything else starts flaring up after that. So in that context, I wouldn't be worried that my heart rate was higher than normal, because I'd know it's just a hormonal fluctuation. So I think she was saying this has only just started, so it's harder to tell. But just start tracking those symptoms, track if they cluster with other things, and then you can be more confident. Oh, it's just my perimenopausal hormones flaring up for a bit, and I don't need to worry about it, versus, oh, it's maybe a sign that I'm getting ill and therefore should be resting. There was lots of questions on racing, how to get into racing for people who are new to triathlon. Rather than try and answer that, because that's a whole talk, which I do as a whole talk, but that's a whole talk in itself. If you look on my website under the freebies section, so feelfitwithlucy.co.uk/freebies, sorry, the S has dropped off the end on the slide there. There's a load of resources on there. There's a top tips booklet. There's a checklist so that you don't need to worry that you'll forget anything on race day. There's a little video on transition training. So have a look on there for some resources to support on there. The woman who first asked also asked about mental health issues. There's some guidance on mindset as well in those top tips. More specifically, menopause questions, how to balance fueling for training with trying to keep the menobelly under control. So we do tend to put on weight through menopause, and we do tend to put on weight around our stomach. Don't try and cut back on the fueling though, or on nutrition generally. Often that's partly a cause of that menobelly. As I say, when we get more stressed, we start to put on more weight around our stomach. We stress our body if we're not giving it the energy it needs to do the training we're asking of it. So keep up with your fueling, but make sure that outside of your training that you're moving towards those whole foods, which will help with the insulin sensitivity, will help with help with a whole load of things that I won't list out again. There's also quite a lot of evidence to show that HIIT training can help, particularly with insulin regulation, which can help with what you've asked about in this question. When we're doing HIIT training, this is not the class that you go to in the gym that's like a half hour or 45-minute HIIT class where you're doing hard stuff with a tiny rest, hard stuff with a tiny rest. If we're doing this to try and address our insulin sensitivity in menopause, we want to be doing true high intensity training. That means you're doing maybe 15, 20 seconds of high intensity, and then you're taking something like a minute's rest. When I do it, I've got my heart rate monitor on. I'm looking, this is where my watch is, why I'm pointing at my wrist. I'm looking to see if my heart rate's gone back down to normal before I do my next set of intervals. So it's proper high intensity, not just it feels really hard because you haven't recovered enough. You recover, you go again, you recover, you go again. And you're only doing maybe 5 to 10 bouts of that. Somebody saying that or quite a few people saying that they're perimenopausal, postmenopausal, and they're finding it hard to improve on their fitness. So just to restate what I've already said, fuel your training, fuel your training, fuel your training. That would be my number one. Number two, are you taking enough rest? We need to make sure we take more rest through perimenopause. Our body takes longer to recover, there's higher rates of inflammation, we're not sleeping so well, a million other things. So we need to make sure we take more rest. You will get better results. I qualified, like I say, I've been trying to qualify for Kona for almost 10 years. I qualified last year by cutting back my training and listening to my body rather than pushing harder. So listen to your body. And then make sure you've got, good quality training as well. It's not throwing as much training as we can at our body, getting rid of the kind of junk training. I do it because I feel I should. Understand what your training, what the goal of the training is and how it's achieving that. So make sure you've got good, structured, progressive training. But at some point, we maybe need to accept that we can't improve forever. We will get older. That has an impact on our body, even if we're doing all of the right stuff. So sometimes it's about acceptance and accepting that we're getting slower. I always ask my body when I go out and race to do the best I can on that day. I'm not comparing myself to other people. I'm not comparing myself to a former version of myself. I'm doing the best I can based on whatever life has thrown at me in the run up to that race. And then I get so much more out of myself and so much more enjoyment. So let's try and stop always comparing ourselves to a former version of ourselves. But, that's, sometimes we need to accept we're not going to make progress, but hopefully there's some ideas that can also help. I think that is it. Any other questions come in?
We did have one more from Kelly. So does reformer Pilates incorporate more of the required strength training when using weights and the weighted springs?
Good question. I guess the answer to that would be, are you in that 5 to 8 rep range? And I'm guessing I've only done reformer a few times. I think generally you're in a higher rep range than that, as in you're going for a minute or something. It's definitely working harder in different ways, and it's really good at targeting certain muscles. And And I'm not saying that therefore the solution is to put on the heaviest band you can and only do 5 to 8 reps, because that's not what it's designed for. So I don't know is the honest answer. But I would say if you're in that 5 to 8 rep range, as in you've done 5 to 8 reps and you couldn't do any more, then yes, probably that's ticking that box. Is it working all the different parts of your body? I know that often Pilates tends to be working more on our glutes, which is brilliant. We really need to strengthen our glutes to help our running, our triathlon. But is it hitting all the different parts of your body? Things like your posterior chain, particularly, that we can work through things like deadlifts. I don't know. Like I say, I've only done it once or twice myself, so I don't know. But yeah, it's probably ticking more of a box. I don't know if it's ticking 100% box, but like I say, let's not aim for perfection. Let's aim for good enough.
That's it for questions in the chat, Lucy.
Amazing. If anybody wants to unmute and ask anything, feel free to. Otherwise, I will probably call it a day in a minute, but I'll stay on a few minutes just in case anybody else wants to ask anything. And well done to all of you who are still here. Well done for making it through to the end. I'm sorry if I talk fast. That thing of trying to get through everything and choose what is most relevant. And I kind of go, oh my God, but all of this could be relevant for somebody. But yeah, well done for making it through. That's an endurance challenge in itself. I can see a few people look like they might be typing, so I'm just going to wait a minute longer. But yes, feel absolutely free to leave. If you've got any feedback, things that I should include, I do this talk every year, so things that I shouldn't have included, things that I should have included, do let me know and I can refine it for next year. Otherwise, thank you very much for coming. I will send you through the recording, as I say, which will have all of that on there. It will have the links and it will have the summary sheets and everything. Brilliant.
Just had one come in from Martina. What are your thoughts on CrossFit and high rocks?
So I think CrossFit is amazing in the way it has empowered women, or it's not literally empowered women, but it's created an environment that has empowered women to start lifting and to do more mobility. It's changed the game in terms of making sure people of all genders do mobility. It's changed the game in terms of making strength training much more popular, and particularly women doing strength training. So that's number one. I see a lot of people who get injured through CrossFit. I think there is, you get your WOD and you want to get through it. And sometimes that leads to a reduction in technique. I think sometimes there's an emphasis, and it very much depends on which box you go to, how they treat these things. So this is not everybody at all, but sometimes there can be an emphasis on getting the workout done versus the quality. And therefore, the injury risk can go up. But, massive pros, some risks. High rocks, same. I mean, brilliant. And, as triathletes, you are if you're a triathlete or a runner, you've got a massive head start, because people always forget the amount of running that is involved in a high rocks. They go in thinking I'm a strength athlete. There's a lot of running involved in there as well. And it's an endurance challenge. So go do one. If you can get a place at one, that's the problem with them now. It's not giving you your full training, but it's adding in that power, which I don't think I talked about at all today. But as we go through perimenopause, male as well, we start to lose power. So there's a lot of power training in there, which is brilliant. It's giving you that endurance. It's good all-round training, but it's not focusing on everything we need to do. For example, again, that posterior chain. I don't think any of the exercises would focus on your posterior chain. It's more of an endurance workout than a strength workout, which sounds funny because you think that I'm using weights and my muscles are all burning, but you are not in that 5 to 8 rep range when you're doing it. So it's a great all-round fitness. But if we're trying to get to that 5 to 8 rep range, most of the stuff, you might do it in a wider training for high rocks. But if you were specifically training, what you do in a high rocks event, it's not strictly what I would call strength training. But again, if you're not doing anything and you start doing that, then that is a massive improvement. So I hope that was a caveated sitting on the fence or coming down both sides of the fence enough there. Anything else come in, or are we good to wrap it up there?
That's it from the chat box.
Brilliant. Amazing. I will send out the email as soon as I can. It was lovely to meet you all. Good luck with all your training. Lovely to see you again, Ellen. You happen to be sitting on the front screen, so it's lovely to see you. And yes, I will hopefully speak to you all. And thank you. Thank you for giving up your lunch hour with me. Take care, everybody. See you.